Have you ever been told you have a frozen shoulder, only to find that the treatment does not seem to be working? Or perhaps you assumed your shoulder pain would resolve on its own, only to discover months later that you actually had a rotator cuff tear that has grown significantly larger in the meantime? These two conditions are among the most commonly confused shoulder problems in medicine, and the confusion is completely understandable. Both cause shoulder pain, both make it difficult to lift your arm, but their underlying causes are entirely different, and critically, their treatments are nearly opposite. Getting this distinction wrong can mean the difference between a full recovery and permanent shoulder damage. Today I am going to walk you through the key differences between frozen shoulder and rotator cuff tear, including simple tests you can perform at home right now to get a strong indication of which one you might be dealing with. I will also tell you exactly when you need to stop waiting and get to a doctor immediately. Let me start by explaining what each condition actually is, because understanding the structure involved makes everything else much clearer. Frozen shoulder, medically known as adhesive capsulitis, is a condition where the capsule surrounding the shoulder joint becomes inflamed, thickened, and scarred. The entire joint gradually locks up. Think of the shoulder capsule as a flexible bag that holds the joint together. In frozen shoulder, that bag shrinks, stiffens, and loses its flexibility entirely. The joint itself becomes the problem, not the muscles or tendons. Research shows that people with diabetes have 3 to 5 times the normal risk of developing frozen shoulder, and the condition is increasingly being seen in people in their 30s and 40s. Not just those in their 50s as the name implies. A rotator cuff tear is something completely different. The rotator cuff is a group of 4 muscles, and they're tendons that wrap around the shoulder joint and allow you to raise and rotate your arm. When one or more of these tendons tear, whether from a sudden injury or gradual wear, the structural machinery that lifts your arm is damaged. The joint capsule itself is fine, but the mechanism driving movement is broken. Studies show that approximately 40% of people over 60 have some degree of rotator cuff damage, and by age 80, that number rises to an astonishing 80%. This means many people living with shoulder pain are already dealing with some level of rotator cuff involvement without knowing it. Here is the single most important distinction between the two conditions, and it is the foundation of everything else you will learn today. The key is the difference between active and passive range of motion. Active range of motion means how far you can move your arm using your own muscle strength. Passive range of motion means how far your arm can be moved when someone else does the lifting for you. In frozen shoulder, the joint capsule itself is locked. Whether you try to lift your own arm or someone else tries to lift it for you, the result is the same. It barely moves, and the attempt causes intense pain. In a rotator cuff tear, the capsule is completely fine. The joint can move freely, but the muscle engine powering that movement is damaged. So when someone else lifts your arm for you, it moves relatively well. But when you try to lift it using your own strength, the arm feels weak, heavy, or simply refuses to cooperate. You can test this right now. Use your good arm to gently support the elbow of your affected arm, and slowly help it rise toward your ear. If even with this external help, the arm barely moves upward and only intense pain results, frozen shoulder is strongly suggested. If your arm rises reasonably well with help but feels weak or painful when you try to lift it on your own, rotator cuff damage is the more likely culprit. This single passive versus active test is your most powerful at-home screening tool. Beyond this fundamental test, several other patterns help distinguish the two conditions. The first is how the pain began. Frozen shoulder typically develops without any specific injury. People often describe waking up one morning and noticing the shoulder had become gradually stiffer and more painful over weeks or months, with no clear starting event. Rotator cuff tears, by contrast, often begin with a specific incident. Lifting something heavy, bracing a fall with an outstretched arm, or feeling a sudden pop or tearing sensation in the shoulder during activity. That said, rotator cuff tendons can also degenerate slowly with age, making the onset less dramatic. In these cases, however, the accompanying feeling of arm weakness, rather than just stiffness, remains a distinguishing feature. The second distinguishing pattern is pain location. Frozen shoulder pain tends to be deep and diffuse, felt throughout the entire shoulder, particularly the front and inner regions of the joint. It is difficult to point to one specific spot. Rotator cuff tear pain, particularly when the supraspinatus tendon is involved, which is the most commonly torn tendon, tends to radiate down the outer side of the shoulder and into the upper arm. A line of pain traveling from the top of the shoulder down the outside of the upper arm toward the elbow is a classic rotator cuff pattern. The third distinguishing pattern involves a phenomenon called the painful arc. When raising your arm from your side, if the pain is most intense between roughly 60 and 120 degrees of elevation, and then actually lessens somewhat above that range, this painful arc pattern is strongly associated with rotator cuff pathology, rather than frozen shoulder. In frozen shoulder, the pain tends to worsen progressively throughout the entire range of motion, rather than spiking in that specific middle zone. The fourth distinguishing pattern is the drop arm sign, one of the most telling indicators of a significant rotator cuff tear. Raise your affected arm out to the side to about shoulder height, and then try to lower it very slowly and with control. If the arm seems to fall under its own weight, rather than lowering smoothly and with control, or if it suddenly drops without warning at a certain point, this is a critical warning sign of a substantial tear in the rotator cuff. This sign has a high specificity for full-thickness tears, meaning its presence very strongly indicates a serious tear is present. The fifth pattern is the nature of nighttime pain. Both conditions cause pain at night, but they do so differently. Frozen shoulder produces a constant, deep aching throughout the night in almost any sleeping position, making it impossible to lie on the affected side. Rotator cuff pain at night is particularly explosive when lying directly on the affected shoulder, as the weight of the body compresses the torn tendon. Many people describe being woken from sleep by a sudden surge of pain the moment they roll onto that side. Understanding how each condition progresses is equally important. Frozen shoulder moves through 3 stages. The painful stage lasting 2 to 9 months, where pain intensifies and movement begins to restrict the frozen stage, lasting 4 to 12 months, where pain may slightly ease, but stiffness reaches its peak, and the thawing stage, lasting 5 to 26 months, where the shoulder gradually releases. The good news is that with proper treatment, over 90% of frozen shoulder patients achieve a significant recovery. However, this takes an average of 18 months to 2 years. And in people with diabetes, the timeline is considerably longer. Rotator cuff tears follow a more concerning trajectory when left untreated. A partial tear can progress to a full-thickness tear. A full-thickness tear can expand in size over time, and if the tear persists for years, the surrounding muscle tissue can undergo fatty degeneration, a process where healthy muscle converts to fat. Once this occurs, even surgical repair has limited capacity to restore full function. This is why early and accurate diagnosis matters so profoundly. For rotator cuff injuries, there are several specific situations where you should not wait and must seek medical attention immediately. If shoulder pain began after a fall, collision, or heavy lifting, and you cannot raise your arm at all, this is an urgent situation. If your shoulder pain is accompanied by numbness, tingling, or weakness traveling down your arm into your hand, nerve compression must be evaluated without delay. If your pain has been present for more than 2 weeks and is worsening, rather than improving, a precise diagnosis is essential. If the shoulder appears swollen, feels warm to the touch, and you have developed a fever, infectious arthritis is a possibility that requires emergency evaluation. If this video helped you, please subscribe and leave a like. I cover joint health topics from shoulder to knee to lower back every week, with clear, evidence-based information you can actually use. Leave your shoulder questions in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video.